So today is Good Friday, and I think Passover started on the 8th. And of course, Sunday, it's going to be Easter Sunday. What better time for targets of organized stalking to reflect on God and the nature of God and the suffering that biblical figures went through, whether we're talking about Jesus from the New Testament or, King David and prophets from the Old Testament. What we're going through is very similar to that. If you if you read the Psalms of David, you see that he was being followed and spied on. He was being hunted and lied about and slandered, and even his own friends and family got involved, and they tried to poison, and people tried to poison him. And did he ever know what he did wrong? I'm not going to say that every person being targeted by this modern day Zersetzung program is a good, righteous, follower of God, or righteous at all. I'm sure there are good and wicked who are being targeted. We don't really know why people are being targeted. I mean, we know why some people get targeted, right? They're whistleblowers, they're activists, they're humanitarians, they're constitutionalists, and so on. I'm sure libertarians also get targeted. But there's so many different groups of people who are targeted, diverse groups, regardless of religious belief, regardless of gender, regardless of race, regardless of political views. So it's hard to pinpoint who or why is doing this. I know some people have their ideas, and maybe some are right. Who knows? Anyway, today's Good Friday, right? Today is, where we remember how Jesus was crucified. And keep in mind, Jesus was the Word made flesh, and his word was simply the golden rule. Treat others the way you would want to be treated. Don't do unto others what you would not want others to do unto you. It really is that simple, right? So he was the Word made flesh, and that was his word. His word was the golden rule. Right? People who hate his word hate him. People who love his word love him. And if you consider, with how much brutality some people are treated nowadays because of their humane nature, because they're humanitarians, because they have compassion, because they have empathy for other people, or because they're trying to protect our freedom, right? They're trying to protect the Constitution, or because they're whistleblowers and they speak out against horrific crimes being committed by governments and organizations. Okay? If you consider the brutality with which they're treated, some years ago I heard about a pastor who was thrown in prison for feeding the poor. Can you believe that? The word is crucified every day, unfortunately, along with those who speak it, whether they're whistleblowers, constitutionalists, humanitarians. I think whether or not people call themselves Christian, today would be the perfect day. I mean, people should think about this every day. I wish they would. But today more so than ever, to consider what this means, what this day means, because it's very symbolic. It's very symbolic. Anyway, the fate of targets of organized stalking seems to be getting worse, right? The propaganda against targets continues, and it just continues to get worse, right? Whether they're calling us mentally ill for pointing out something that's actually happening, for complaining about something that's actually happening, or intentionally driving us to, a public outburst or a public breakdown, gaslighting, until we really do begin to show signs of mental illness, so that then they can call us mentally ill, or whether they're calling us bad or monsters or whatever else they decide to label with us, when we finally do break down and start shouting at people and lashing out in anger, rightful anger, because the masses never hear our side, so all they see are the negative responses that the provocateurs intended to get out of us. So that's what happened to the prophets. That's what happened to Jesus. That's what happens, whether or not a person is a theist or an atheist or a Christian or not. This is what happens nowadays to whistleblowers and humanitarians, human rights activists, constitutionalists, probably to libertarians too. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people who call themselves Christian who go along with these attacks, right? So let's remember something. Again, Jesus was the Word made flesh, right? He might not be flesh anymore, but he's still the Word. There are people, and people can call themselves anything. That doesn't make it true. Those who love his word love him. Those who hate his word hate him. There are a lot of people who claim to love him, but their hearts are far from him. They do and say the exact opposite of everything he said. They hate his word. And vice versa, there are people who love his word. They try to follow the golden rule. They just don't realize that that's of him. Right? Because they've been lied to for so long by wolves in sheep's clothing who commit atrocities in his name. And it's horrific. It's horrific. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that in order to follow him you have to be absolutely perfect. Nobody is perfect. I'm certainly not. We all break down. And targets of organized stalking, the chances of breaking down and lashing out are even higher, because this is what the psychopaths want from us, to drive us to the complete breaking point. So I'm not saying that, to follow him you can never get angry, or you never have a bad day, or you never say something you shouldn't. Everybody has bad days. Everybody makes mistakes. What I am saying is that there are people who intentionally try to harm others, and they do it in his name. And that is absolutely abhorrent. It is horrible. Okay, they are wolves in sheep's clothing. A wolf in sheep's clothing, is not someone who outwardly looks like a wolf. It's someone who appears to be kind and gentle, but inwardly is ravenous and seeks to devour and tear to shreds. Anyway, I just wanted to put this out there, for everyone, but for especially for targets. No matter what anyone tells you, you didn't do anything to cause this. You didn't do anything to bring it on. You didn't do anything to deserve it. I don't care who you are. I don't care what race you are. I don't care what gender you are. I don't care what religion you profess to be of, or whether you're an atheist or theist. You don't deserve this. And you never did anything to cause it. The propaganda is getting worse, and it's going to continue getting worse. Whether it's propaganda claiming that we're all just mentally ill, or it can be anything, or that we're just bad, or whether they see targets finally just break down and start lashing out, and they just assume that targets are all violent, or whatever it is. That's going to get worse. And what better time in place to think about what the biblical figures went through, what the prophets went through, what Jesus himself went through. And I'm not connecting myself to that, and I'm not saying that other targets are connected to that. I understand why it's tempting to try to connect ourselves to that, because at least it turns a horrific situation into something positive. If we can say, well, maybe it's happening for a good reason. Maybe we're just special, right? I'm not doing that, but because religious figures also went through this, you can be put through something like this and still be a good person, and still be worthy of God. Just because this is happening to you does not mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you're horrible and unworthy of God and damned, like they want you to believe you are. And they do, right? Whoever's running the sick program, they want to tear targets down on every level. Physically, psychologically, emotionally, and even spiritually. They want you to feel abandoned by everybody, including God. Remember, Jesus himself felt abandoned by God, right? If we're talking about the Stations of the Cross, or I don't know, what about the agony in the garden, right? We're only human. We're only human, so of course, it makes sense that many would feel that way, especially in situations where there are psychopaths who want us to feel that way. Try not to. Understand what they're trying to do, because once they get you to a point where you're abandoned by everybody, humans have have turned against you. Every single group that you try to enter has turned against you and run you out, and not even God is helping you. It's very easy to turn cold and to become angry and hateful ourselves, and to become monsters. And this is what we have to try to prevent, because once we become that, once we become the monsters that the psychopaths want us to be, then we've lost everything. Then we've lost everything. Anyway, I have to go because there's some commotion going on now. I have to hurry up and end this. But God be with you.